Hello, everybody, and welcome to our session today. I'm Melanie Blanksby, and I'm Acting CEO here at DCC. And for our Wellbeing Wednesday today, I'm joined by Dr. Gemima Fitzgerald, who's a clinical psychologist with a strong interest and expertise in the area of building resilience, and has worked with many of the carers that we've worked with over the last few years. We've slightly changed our lunch and listen sessions, and you've already perhaps seen the carer clinic with Dr. Raja, and we've had some good feedback from those sessions, including questions that people are sending in. So we're going to do that and run monthly Wellbeing Wednesday sessions with Gemima as well, so she can talk about different topics each time. Gemima, it's really kind of you to join us today. Would you like to tell the people that are watching and that are catching up on video a little bit about you and what you do and why you're joining us today and for the future sessions as well?
Thanks, Melanie. It's lovely to be here. Yes, so I'm Gemima Fitzgerald. I'm a clinical psychologist, and I've been involved with Dementia Carers Count now since 2017, so quite a long time. And I've got a real heart for people who are in the situation of caring for someone with dementia. The reason we're doing this, I guess, is these regular Wednesday wellbeing slots is because we know that carers often get sidelined, and so much of the focus and attention is on the person with dementia. So it's really important that we just put aside some time every month just to really, we already do in the courses that are run, but just to give it an extra bit of time to well-being and just to give it a focus. So today it's about depression, and hopefully it'll be helpful.
Lovely, thank you so much. So if you've got a question and you want to pop them in the chat, we'll try to answer them. Bear with us if it isn't answered immediately, because sometimes they're not easy to spot. And also, if you want to send a private message to Dementia Carers Count Facebook account, then we can keep it anonymous. So obviously, this is a sensitive topic, and not everyone feels comfortable talking about it. And that's part of the reason we want to do this today. So if Gemima and I are chatting about it and you think of something you'd really like to know, do give us your question and feel free to send it anonymously, or send it through the direct message saying it's anonymous.
Yeah.
And actually, if you think of something after the event, do still send it through, because we can work with Gemima to make sure that we reply in the chat to get you that answer that you're looking for. Gemima, if we start thinking about what depression is, we all feel low in mood from time to time, and different days bring different feelings. But what is the difference between feeling a bit low and having a low mood and depression itself?
Yeah, you're right. We all feel low. I don't know of a single person who hasn't felt low at some point in their life, low in mood, sad, flat, lacking in motivation, having a down day. And it's really normal, especially when you're going through a time of challenge, whether that's caring for someone with dementia or something else that's difficult. So that's really, really normal and hard. But the difference with depression is the feelings might be quite similar. So some of the symptoms of depression might be, some of it's emotional, so feeling sad, tearful maybe, perhaps feeling a lot of guilt, perhaps feeling hopeless about the future, about the present, feeling low self-worth, low self-esteem. So really, really difficult stuff. Maybe getting more angry and snappy, having a shorter fuse than normal, feeling lack of motivation, just can't be bothered to do anything. And also then the behavior is often different, so depression, you would have, you might withdraw, you just can't face seeing people. Or if you do face seeing people, it's exhausting because you're wearing a mask and just pretending that you're fine when you're not fine. And often people don't look depressed, that's the challenge. Lots of people are very good at covering up. But then when you get home, you might just feel exhausted by that effort. And your appetite might have changed. You might be eating more, that emotional eating, or not having an appetite much at all. So your eating habits might be different to normal. Your sleep might be different. So some people can't sleep at night or really disturb sleep. Other people find they're want to sleep all the time and just sleeping too much. So there's so much around it, and just feeling tired And then what goes on in the brain, which is, you know, struggling to concentrate, struggling to focus, struggling to remember things. So having memory problems, and getting really stuck in negative, sort of ruminating on negative thoughts and negative patterns. And the thing with depression, where it's different to low mood, is all of that stuff needs to really be pervasive and persistent for at least 2 weeks or more.
Oh, so the feelings might be similar, but the time,
exactly,
how consistently that's the case, is it might make a difference to whether it's depression versus a bad day.
100%. It's the time, and it's the feeling of being, it's a bit like being sucked down into quicksand and you can't get out again. That's very symptomatic of depression. So that's what characterizes it, a feeling of I can't get out. Whereas low mood, something might lift you out of it, even if it's just temporarily. But with depression, you get stuck. And yes, the length of time, it's usually several weeks or more.
Okay, and what what are the causes of depression? I'm sure there isn't just one.
No. Well, I mean, it's kind of multifaceted, and it's so different. Everybody's different. So I can't give like a straight, this is what will cause it. But genetics can play a part. So, if it's in your family, if certain, it might be more likely that you're susceptible, not that you'll be depressed, but you might just be a bit more susceptible. So there might be something genetic in there. Also childhood, so having some really adverse childhood experiences can make people more susceptible. It's just like having something there that then can be triggered later in life when you're going through something difficult or not. So sometimes something difficult can trigger it. So, going through a big change, a big transition, becoming a family carer of someone with dementia might trigger it. So loss of a job might trigger it. But also it could be just nothing seems to have triggered it, and it just seems to have happened. I'm not a huge fan of the whole brain chemistry, chemical imbalance theory, I have to say, but I think it kind of depends on a lot of factors. So the biopsychosocial model, there's a bit of biology in there, potentially a bit of what's going on socially. Maybe you've gone through financial hardships or something. You've lost your friends, and then what's going on in your mind. How you're thinking. So a combination of all of those things.
I think I'm just going to add in a little thought here, which is different generations have different attitudes to feeling depressed. Some generations is a pride aspect to this, and just wondered if you've got any words of comfort really for people that might be feeling under pressure to carry on as normal, because that's where they come from, and might actually need a little bit of a nudge to take some action if perhaps they are relating to what you've just said about feeling like this over a period of time.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Melanie, because nowadays, the generation that's coming up now, they're brought up to talk about mental health so much more than I know I was as a child. So yes, and sometimes older generations, it's much more difficult to be vulnerable and to say I'm struggling, and sometimes because feeling vulnerable or expressing vulnerability might be seen by yourself as feeling weak or failing in some way, and really it's not that at all. It takes a huge amount of courage to ask for help and to say I'm finding this difficult. I know the times in my life when it's taken the most courage for me to get through the day is when I've had to say this is really hard for me. I find it a lot easier to just power through, but actually it takes a lot of courage to say I'm struggling. So I would just like to encourage anyone who struggles with that, is that it's not a sign of weakness or that you're failing. It's a sign of strength to ask for help.
Absolutely. Times are changing, and I think that we need to sort of bear that in mind. What's the difference then? Because you've been helping us for some time understanding grief, and what's the difference actually between depression and grief? Do they sometimes feel the same?
They do sometimes feel the same, but there are some key differences, and sometimes they can overlap. So grief, we know, comes after a loss, or can come after a loss. That loss could be bereavement. It could be anticipatory grief, where, you know, if you're caring for someone with dementia and you kind of can see the progression of the illness, or if someone has a life-limiting illness in any sense, seeing that deterioration can bring on anticipatory grief as you kind of are getting used to having losses of your relationship, losses in your relationship. But grief can feel similar. So all those things I said before about, you know, feeling tearful, feeling angry, feeling, you know, all these emotions, feeling lack of motivation. But the difference with grief is we come in and out, it's like waves. So depression doesn't feel like waves on the whole. Depression on the whole feels like you're sucked down into a pit. But with grief, it's more like a wave that comes over you. It might come out of nowhere, or there might be a trigger. You might listen to a song on the radio, and then you feel this wave of grief. And then, but something might be able to pull you out of it. So usually when you're first grieving, in a sense, it's more intense. And usually over time, the waves might still feel intense, but you'll have periods out of it. So there's something called the dual process model of grief, which is where you swing. It's like a pendulum. You swing in and out. 1 minute you'll be intensely grieving or crying or reminiscing or whatever. And then you might then laugh and think of a happy memory, or just be focusing on your job or something completely different, and you can come out in and out, if that makes sense.
No, that's really helpful. And I think you know, we'll talk in a little bit about what people can do if they are feeling like this. And we've got some questions and some comments coming in now, so I'm just going to thank Craig, who has said depression didn't exist when I was younger. You were simply told to get on with it. It certainly does exist, and I'm so happy people can talk about it now, although many still don't. And I think that's really encouraging, Craig, and that's very much what we were trying to say, that for different people, depending on, you know, where you come from, that getting on with it. If you're a family care of someone with dementia, you've got a lot on your plate, and it's part of taking care of yourself to acknowledge that you could have some form of depression, and you've already got a lot on your plate. So it'd be quite nice to think about how we can deal with it. And the next question is anonymous, and it says, I've been trying to get my friend to see someone, but she won't. I'm really worried about her mental health, but she says she's fine. She declines help and is becoming less responsive to texts and calls. And I was wondering if people might, you know, we do sometimes recognize things in other people and worry about them. And this, I think it'd be quite nice if you could let that questioner know what we can and can't do when it's someone else, when it's not ourselves.
It's really hard, isn't it, when it's someone you care about, and you can see that they're just not themselves, and you're worried about them. I mean, the best thing to do in that situation, you've probably tried this, but in case anyone who's listening hasn't, is to be alongside them. And sometimes when you're feeling low, or you see someone feeling really, really low or sad, or you're worried about them, the natural instinct is to try and rescue them and fix it, and say, look, what you need to do is go and see your GP, or what you need to do is this. But sometimes people don't want to hear that, or aren't ready to hear that. So just to be a listening ear, to be kind, and to be willing to sit with them, because when people are depressed, they're not always easy to be with. You know, it can be really hard to sit with someone who's depressed and not try and cheer them up. You know, it's different if you're just a bit low and you just need a nice day out with someone. But actually, if you're feeling properly depressed, clinically depressed, then you might not benefit too much for someone just being with you and cracking jokes or trying to cheer you up or tell you that you need to go to the GP. But what your friend might need is a friend, and just someone to say, look, I can see it looks like you're struggling. I don't know if you are, but I'm here for you. And if you want to talk, I'd love to listen. Just to be okay, because that's quite uncomfortable for us as human beings as well, to be that person that isn't rescuing and isn't making it all better, but actually just know that in itself is an intervention, and that is really helpful. So obviously, if you're seriously worried and you seriously think that they might be having suicidal thoughts or anything like that, then I would definitely say to them, you do need to, you know, speak to your GP or phone the Samaritans or talk to somebody. But yeah, I think as a friend, the best thing you can do is to be alongside.
Okay, that's really, really helpful. And maybe we could pop the Samaritans number into the chat for everybody. I've got several more comments here. Anne-Marie has said, my husband has advanced Parkinson's and was diagnosed with Lewy body dementia a couple of years ago. I'm hoping to get some helpful advice from today's session. This is the hardest thing I've ever had to cope with, seeing my beautiful husband lose his sense of being. So I think it'd be really nice to see what we can help Anne-Marie with in terms of what can she do, how can she help her well-being, her mental well-being while she's going through this.
Yes, and yes, I'm just reading her comments. So it's about her and what she can do.
Yes.
Yeah, I think so what we know for well-being, there are 5 pillars really of well-being, and it's really good to have a bit of a checkup of how we're doing with those 5 pillars. So that's things like sleep. Are you getting enough sleep? Appetite, are you getting the right diet, healthy food and enough of it, the right amount? Relaxation, so having time to actually unwind. That can be really hard when you're caring for someone with dementia, but that relaxation doesn't have to be a whole day. It can be 10 minutes. It's about plugging, if you think of yourself as a mobile phone, plugging yourself in for a charge for 10 minutes. It also needs to be connection. So feeling that you're connecting with people, and that is so vital and so often overlooked, especially when you're caring for somebody and you're grieving at the same time, it sounds like, Anne-Marie. So, there's a lot going on for you, but if you can have a sense of connection, so talking to somebody, reaching out for support, and still hopefully feeling that you can connect with your husband, but maybe in a different way. And also getting some exercise. That's the other pillar, that's movement. That doesn't have to be going to the gym, although it can be, but getting outside, getting some movement, getting some fresh air, really important. So it's usual when you're caring for someone with dementia, or you're going through another really stressful life event, that one of those or more of those pillars are going to be knocked and affected. So if you can look after the other ones, so if it's impossible to get a decent night's sleep at the moment, just impossible, then make sure that you're looking after the rest of them. And I think when we're feeling very low in mood, our natural instinct is to not do the things that are good for us. It's kind of counterintuitive. But if you're feeling depressed, I could say to you, well, what you need to do is make sure that pillar of exercise is still strong. It's the last thing you feel like doing. Or being connecting with others, it's the last thing you feel like doing. And the problem is that when we cancel things, so say, for example, Anne-Marie might have a friend that has said, oh, let's go and meet for a coffee, and it might be the last thing she feels like doing. You get an instant adrenaline or a dopamine rush as the relief of cancelling that plan. Or I'm going to stay in bed today, I'm going to cancel that plan. You get a relief, and that's quite addictive, but really unhelpful in the long run, because it keeps us stuck in the depressive cycle.
That's really interesting. Sense? Yeah, it does. And a really, really interesting thing to know. And I think people might find that quite helpful to know that cancelling something might make you feel good in the short term, but it's not making you connect with the outside world. Yeah. I've got several more questions and messages coming through. I think some of what you've just said might help Chloe. She says, I don't know what to do with myself. When I get the chance to rest, I find it so difficult to do so with so many thoughts going around in my head, but it's difficult to keep busy. There doesn't seem like there's much point. So I'd really like to see how do we stop that washing machine thought thing? Because I certainly know that I have it when something, when I've got too many things going on in my mind, it's like an overwhelm, and then it becomes quite difficult to get back out of.
It's the kind of thing, I talk about rumination, we just go over and over the washing machine, clothes spinning round and round, and it's so unhelpful and so hard to stop when you're really feeling stressed and overwhelmed. So the first thing to do is just to take the pressure off yourself. You don't need to fix it, so just pause. I love a metaphor. I like the metaphor of, so you've all heard of quicksand. So quicksand is where, if you're on a sandy beach and there's some quicksand in it, you would step onto it and you would find yourself sucked down. So I said before that's what depression can feel like. You're getting sucked hard, further and further down. It's hard to get yourself out. And what we know about quicksand is the more you try and get out, the further down you sink. And it's the same sometimes with these thoughts. the more you try and stop the thoughts, the more they just whir around, because it's just the way it is. And what we know about quicksand, what the rescue services say, is if you ever get stuck, is to just relax, lie back, and very gradually you will float to the surface. And so there is something about just accepting, I am feeling like this. A bit of mindfulness, just notice the thoughts, just notice this is what my brain's doing right now. Be kind to yourself. Take some nice, slow, deep breaths. Don't try and stop the thoughts, but just just pause and try and slow down. Even if it's just physically, just slow down for a moment and just stop it. Don't try and change anything. And gradually you will rise to the surface and things will start to feel that little bit better.
I'm just going to add at this point that this will be saved as a video. So if you need to replay that bit, because I think that's a really useful, slightly terrifying quicksand analogy, but really useful, soothing coming out of it. I think there's a lot of people that were around in the 70s. We were all, for some reason, very fearful of quicksand.
I was, yes.
Yeah, it was a thing. But I really like the feeling of coming out of it. So, I think that could be something that people could refer back to by coming back to this, the recording of this, which will be on our Facebook page and on our YouTube account.
Okay.
I've got a very helpful message here from Sue, who said it's refreshing to be able to discuss this. Thank you. With my experiences, it's very difficult to discuss it. I use an amazing Facebook group, Dementia Awareness Group, to offload emotions. And there's still very poor awareness of carers' input, and this does need to be highlighted more. She's a nurse and now the main carer for both of her parents who have Alzheimer's, and being on the other side is so very different. It needs to be taught with health and social care staff. It's been a really steep learning curve for Sue. And I think that's exactly why Dementia Carers Count is here as a charity, because we recognise it, but there's still a huge amount to be done. And thank you, Sue, for sharing how one of the ways you use to cope, because I'm assuming that a connection of sending someone a message or having a little online chat is, I'm sure face-to-face contact with someone is useful, but we all know that with caring, you don't always have free time. So, is a chat on the phone a nice thing to have with a friend? If is that one of the ways you can connect?
Absolutely. Anything that you can do to connect. And, it was only during lockdown that we got into Zoom and FaceTime and all of that stuff in a new way. So anything, it doesn't have to be face-to-face. Obviously, it's nice.
It's nice, yeah, it would be lovely. But we all know that just occasionally you run into someone, if you take your dog for a walk and you cross and say hello to someone, that can sometimes have a really nice impact, even though it's not a proper conversation. So Michaela has also said, that's exactly what happened to me. I did less and less until I ended up feeling trapped. And it was so hard breaking the cycle, but I felt much better within just weeks. I wish I'd realised sooner what was happening to me. Yeah. It's not easy, and she really feels for anyone going through anything similar. And I think that's really, really kind of you to share that, Michaela, because that's you telling us that you did go through it, you didn't recognise it straight away, but once you did and were able to do something about it, you know that you wouldn't want someone else to go through it. And that's really kind. I've got an anonymous comment here, which is something. It'd be nice to know if we can give some advice. Sometimes I feel like I want to walk out the front door and not come back. I hate feeling this way, but I do, and I really need some respite. And respite is obviously something that is a big challenge.
Yeah, and that feeling of wanting to run away and escape, and then feeling guilty for it. It's like the double whammy. It's bad enough having the feeling, but then beating yourself up for having the thought and the feeling is even harder. So just firstly to say to you, you're not alone. I can't tell you the amount of people that have that feeling. It's so common, and it's very human. And it's not because you're not a nice person or a caring person or any of that stuff. It's because this is really overwhelming and hard, and it's human to want to escape. So the first thing to do is to be compassionate to yourself. The same compassion that you show others, show it to yourself. You have not failed. You are not a bad person for having that feeling. It's just really, really tough. So let yourself off the hook. And it sounds like you need some help and some support.
Yeah, I'm going to be giving out some numbers and things in a moment, and I think that would be really helpful. And we've had a nice message back from Anne-Marie who's thanked us for covering her topic, and also said that she's got some wonderful family and friends who sometimes bring them lunch and food for when she doesn't feel like cooking. And I'm wondering whether is that a practical way you can support someone when they're going through a tough time? Because I'm sure for every person that's listening that is suffering themselves, there might be other people that are feeling worried about someone else, as one of our questions was
Absolutely.
about a friend.
And we know that dementia affects the whole family, doesn't it? It doesn't just affect one person, it often affects lots of people within the network. So yeah, it's normal to notice that other people are struggling too.
Absolutely. A nice thank you from Simone, saying this is very interesting and informative, and thank you very much. So I think it's definitely worth sharing this video when it's up later, if there's anyone that you think it might help. Just to also say that we have our 0800 number, which is 0800 652 1102, and that's open Monday to Friday from 9 till 5, and it's free to call. And this is a place where we might be able to help you find the right place to speak to someone. Gemima has kindly given some of the ways you can help yourself, and when, you know, we'll talk finally at the end about when, you know, when you should definitely visit your GP. But we've got other, if there's practical things around being a dementia carer, we can help with those on that line, and we're there to talk to you, and we're there to support you. So if there's anything we can do, that number will be in the chat. And we have a text service, and we're going to leave those in the chat too. Now, the text service works slightly differently. That's entirely the sort of thing you can do. It's 24 hours a day. And you can call it when you just need to have a chat with someone, but it's by text. It's anonymous. It won't show up on your bill. No one can hear you doing it. So if you don't have time for yourself, it's quite a good way of having an opportunity just to say, I feel like this, what can I do? And the text handlers are all qualified in this area, and they can just give you some tips, whether it's 2 o'clock in the morning, 8 p.m. at night, Monday morning. They're there just to help people through, because we really recognize that sometimes even making a phone call isn't possible. So the 0800 number is there for you. It's something we think that's really important, that people are able to talk or to get help. And I think it'd be really good if just for the last couple of minutes, Gemima, you could just say, you've given the pillars, and at what point, you know, alternatively, when do you think suggest calling the GP, and what should someone sort of say? You know, you've got to get past sometimes the receptionist to get an appointment, or you might have to fill in a box. And I think a little bit of very direct advice of, I feel like this, might be helpful for people.
Yeah, I think if really quickly, if you think that, you know, those symptoms of depression that I was talking about earlier, if you think you are feeling that and you have been feeling it consistently for several weeks and nothing pulls you out of it, it's definitely worth talking to your GP. I would say phone them up and say, I think I'm depressed. I need to see a GP. I would try not to just be palmed off with antidepressants without sitting down with them if you can. Medication can help, but also talking to someone alongside that, it's research shows is the best solution when you really are depressed. Good news is that most people, if you seek help, most people do get better from having depression. And also, if your depression is related to an event, which is what we're talking about here, if it's something really tough going on in your life that's brought this on, then that's more situational depression. It's sometimes called adjustment disorder. And actually, that's where if you weren't in this situation, you'd be okay. Your mental health is usually okay. It's just that this has brought this on. So, and again, you know, that's about just getting the right support in place. So I would definitely say, and if you're having suicidal thoughts, it's normal, but you do need to talk to somebody. So I would definitely say get to your GP as soon as you can.
Thank you very much, Gemima. I'd like to thank you for that. You're back on the 29th of March for another session. I think you're doing identity next, which is so important for people that become a carer, obviously not always through choice.
No, and I think it will be, hopefully it'll be a really good session. Is I think when you've had any major life transition, you know, you've become a mother, you've become a grandmother, whatever it is, or you've become a family carer of someone with dementia, this is big shift in identity. And so many people say, I don't know who I am anymore. I don't feel like me anymore. And we really want to talk about that and give some support.
Lovely. I think our time's very nearly up, and I just want to say thank you for Ellie, who's looking forward to seeing the video because she joined us late. And that's exactly why we make the video, so that people can, you know, take their time over it and watch it when it's convenient for them. But we're always here for your questions, and you can message us at any time, even if we haven't got a session. And Gemima will make sure that she can give you an answer in the format you prefer. And do keep those numbers handy that are in the chat, because I think they'll be useful, and obviously share them with other people if you think that perhaps they're not ready for the GP call, but they might need a bit of our support. We help people with financial issues, accessing benefits, accessing services that perhaps they haven't been able to access so far. So we can offer very practical financial support and emotional support. And that's what our 0800 number is for. So it'd be really nice to pick back up with Gemima in a couple of weeks. And in the meantime, I'd like to thank you again, Gemima, and to ask everyone to take great care of themselves and stay in touch with us.
Thank you.